Get out, you parasite. I was stunned, staring at my belongings thrown at the front door. My mother-in-law's voice cut through the air like a knife. Seeing her demonic expression, I understood everything. My sister-in-law was peeking from behind, and a cold sweat ran down my back. Jack wasn't home yet, which meant these two were trying to kick me out without him knowing. "Don't you ever come near my brother again," my sister-in-law sneered, exchanging a triumphant smile with her mother. I looked around, but there wasn't a single passerby in sight. I felt like a frog being stared down by a snake. Swallowing hard, I said, "I'll be gone in an hour," trying to keep my voice steady. It was a gamble. I pulled my phone from my pocket and made a call to a certain person. "My name is Emma. I'm a 35-year-old web designer living in the city. I first got interested in web design during my college days, which led me to this career. Despite the daily busyness, my work doesn't involve much overtime, and I've been leading a fulfilling life. The turning point came 2 years ago when a colleague mentioned, 'I have someone I want you to meet,' and out of curiosity, I agreed. At that time, I was honestly ready to enjoy single life without getting married. Just meet him once, what do you say? He's a friend from my college days, a nice guy, though a bit timid," my colleague said, laughing over drinks. So, I decided to meet Jack. "Nice to meet you, my name is Emma," I said the first time I met Jack at a cafe near street. We both had work, so we chose a place where we could meet casually and quickly. "Hi, nice to meet you, I'm Jack," he introduced himself in a high-pitched voice, clearly not used to dealing with women. Initially, Jack didn't start much conversation, but when I mentioned that driving was my hobby, his eyes lit up. It turns out he works as a car mechanic and loves cars. He's a year older than me but had no experience dating women, which he seemed quite concerned about. However, as we talked more about our hobbies, he warmed up significantly. By the time we parted, we had even made plans to meet again. Life is so unpredictable. After a few dates, Jack and I started a relationship. As my colleague had warned, Jack had a timid side. He always worried about my preferences when choosing a restaurant, but that was part of his kindness, which I didn't mind. In the past, I preferred more assertive men, but as I've gotten older, I've come to appreciate someone calm and conversational. In that regard, Jack was the perfect match. A year into our relationship, Jack proposed, and we decided to get married. Before meeting him, I never thought I'd be married within a year. Everything happened so quickly that it felt almost scary, but Jack was a stable and reliable person, which reassured me. Since my parents passed away in an accident when I was young, I was raised in an orphanage and had no parents to introduce Jack to. On Jack's side, his father was absent and his mother and sister lived together. So, we decided to visit his family home to meet them. Jack seemed oddly gloomy when I suggested meeting his mother and sister, which I chalked up to nerves. On the day of the visit, Jack and I arrived at his family home, an old house that felt like a real family home. I wore a simple black dress, suitable for meeting his family. "Nice to meet you, my name is Emma," I said, greeting my mother-in-law and sister-in-law. There was a brief pause as they sized me up. My mother-in-law looked like a high-class lady with glasses and a sparkling bracelet. My sister-in-law was quite heavy and dressed flamboyantly, which was a stark contrast to Jack's slim build. I was surprised by how different she looked from him. "Oh, you must be Emma. Nice to meet you, I'm Jack's mother," she said. Her tone was polite, but there was something sticky about it. I was wondering what kind of girl would show up, and wow, you really surprised me, so plain and that dingy dress too. I was stunned by her words. "Well, just prepare yourself because you'll be doing as we say from now on," my mother-in-law continued, with my sister-in-law nodding in agreement. I had no idea what they were talking about and stood there, dumbfounded. Didn't Jack tell you? It was promised that when we got married, you'd live here with us, my sister-in-law said. That's right, Mom's legs are bad, and I'm busy looking for a spouse. So you know the drill, she added, leaning in close to Jack. He looked troubled but nodded in agreement. Wait, what do you mean by living together? I asked, feeling shocked. That's exactly what it means. We're going to live here, Jack said, looking guilty. I couldn't believe it. The idea of living with my mother-in-law and sister-in-law hadn't been mentioned before we got married. It was clear from just one look that these women weren't good people. I felt an urge to flee right then and there. It'll be fine, right, Mom? Emma, and you'll get along, right? Jack asked, trying to smooth things over. Yes, of course. She's a precious daughter-in-law, after all. We'll take good care of her, my mother-in-law replied, her tone ringing false in my ears. It didn't seem likely they would take good care of me at all. I'm sorry, but I have to leave, I blurted out, wanting to escape. The meeting ended soon after, but on the way home, I confronted Jack. I'm against living together. You never know what might happen, I said, hoping he'd understand. But it would really help with the finances. And Emma, you could share the chores, making things easier, right? We won't be living together forever. Let's save up some money and buy a new house in a year or two. Think of it as just putting up with it until then, please, Jack pleaded. His point made some sense. It was difficult to buy our own place right away, and living at his parents' house would allow us to save money. It seemed Jack couldn't stand up to his mother and sister. After thinking it over for a while, I sighed and reluctantly agreed. In hindsight, that decision was a mistake, and I deeply regret it. As soon as we submitted our marriage certificate to the town hall, Jack and I moved into his parents' house. Welcome. I'm glad you're here. Now, Emma, you can start by cleaning the bathroom. They've gotten quite dirty, so make sure you scrub them well. My room next, and once you're done cleaning, please take care of the shopping and cooking for dinner, my mother-in-law instructed, catching me off guard. I thought I'd at least get a chance to greet them and relax a bit first. Wait, am I supposed to do all that? I asked, surprised. Of course, that's why we talked about living together in the first place, she replied. Her words left me stunned. They had proposed living together just to dump all the household chores on me. I felt dizzy with the shock of this realization. Jack was in the restroom and missed the whole conversation. When he came back, my mother-in-law and sister-in-law acted as if nothing had happened, simply saying, well then, take care, and disappearing into their rooms. I couldn't bring myself to tell Jack what had just transpired. We had just gotten married, and I didn't want to start off by speaking ill of his family. What's wrong? He'd asked. Nothing, I replied. I should have told Jack right then what his mother and sister had said, but pride and an attempt to be considerate stopped me. That decision would come back to haunt me. Living at my in-laws' house soon became overwhelming. As expected, my mother-in-law and sister-in-law pushed all the household chores onto me. Emma, you can come home on time from work, can't you? I can't do household chores because of my bad legs, my mother-in-law said. Yes, and I'm a nurse, so my work hours are irregular, my sister-in-law added. We used to have a housekeeper, but she couldn't come anymore because of other commitments. It's a relief that you're here, Emma. It was clear they planned to exploit me. Please wait, I have work too. I can leave at regular hours some days, but it gets really busy during peak times. Why don't we all share the household chores? The same conditions apply to Jack. You can do chores that are easier on your legs. If the four of us share, it'll significantly reduce the burden on each person, right? I proposed, thinking it was a fair and constructive solution. What? Why are you deciding how to divide the chores in this house? My sister-in-law snapped. That's right, I've told you I can't do anything because my legs hurt. This is why people raised in orphanages are clueless, my mother-in-law added. Their harsh words silenced me. My silence was taken as defeat, and I ended up responsible for all the household chores. Every day after that was hell. Not only did I have to do all the work, but they also nitpicked everything I did, from the food I cooked to the cleaning. Emma, your cooking is too bland. Is this the kind of bad food they fed you in the orphanage? They sneered. Did you clean the bathroom yesterday? I found a hair. They continued, finding fault with even the smallest things. You're eating off our money, so it's only natural you do at least this much right, my mother-in-law said one day. That was the final straw. With all due respect, I also work and contribute financially to this household. Shouldn't we all be equal in this? I argued. You call that work? All you do is tap on a computer. It's not like you're dealing with life or death situations like me, my sister-in-law sneered, her face twisted in mockery. Sure, my job as a web designer might not be as nerve-wracking as nursing, but dismissing it as just tapping on a computer was insulting. However, I knew that arguing back would only escalate the situation, so I bit my tongue. Oh, and Emma, you went to the cafe near the station after work yesterday, didn't you? My mother-in-law suddenly said. I was taken aback. I had gone to the cafe, but how did she know? Sorry about that. I had a GPS tracker put on your phone, so I know everything you do, she said nonchalantly. I was stunned by her revelation. GPS? Why would you do something like that? I asked, bewildered. It was clear they weren't content with just tormenting me at home. They had resorted to tracking my every move. Of course, it's to monitor your activities, she replied smugly. Unbelievable. I pulled out my phone and tried to disable the GPS, but no matter what I did, I couldn't turn it off. It's useless. I've locked it with a password. But it's fine, isn't it? Just don't do anything suspicious, and you'll be okay. Her words were infuriating. The issue wasn't about being suspicious, it was about my privacy. I considered buying a new phone, but it seemed ridiculous to spend money because of my in-laws' actions. My mental state was on the brink. Jack seemed to realize his mother and sister were mistreating me, but his timid nature prevented him from standing up to them. Although Jack initially suggested saving up and moving out, my in-laws were spending the money I earned. It seemed like we might never save enough to leave, trapping me in this house forever. The mere thought was terrifying. Unable to bear it any longer, I called someone I hadn't spoken to in a while when no one was around. It had been some time, so I expected them to be surprised. I was at my limit and needed help. As I listened to the ringtone, I prayed they would answer. After about 5 rings, they picked up. Relieved, I greeted them with a long time no see and began to share my troubles. They were initially shocked but offered their support. As I spoke, tears streamed down my cheeks, and I kept saying, "Thank you," over and over. 3 months passed. During that time, being tracked by GPS, I would get accused of using errands as an excuse to skip chores or secretly meet a man. I tried to ignore their baseless accusations. Jack attempted to stand up to his mother and sister by saying, "Stop it," but he always shrank under their glares. It seemed he had been under their control since childhood. Realizing this, I stopped hoping that Jack would save me. Though I still loved him, living with his mother and sister made it hard to understand my own feelings. Then, one day, I had to attend a company training session, which required me to be away overnight. The thought of not having to return to my in-laws' house, even if just for work, made my heart leap. During the training, my colleagues commented on how relaxed I seemed, making me realize just how stressful my home life had become. The overnight training ended in a blink, and I wished it could have lasted another week. On the second day, we were dismissed early, around 3:00 p.m. Feeling dejected, I returned home and immediately noticed a pile of luggage at the entrance. "What's this?" I muttered to myself. The luggage was scattered haphazardly, and upon closer inspection, I saw my clothes and beloved pillow among the items. It was all my stuff. As I stood there, stunned, the front door suddenly flung open. "Get out, you parasite!" my mother-in-law yelled. Her voice pierced my ears as I stared blankly at my belongings tossed at the entrance. Seeing the demonic look on her face, I understood everything. My sister-in-law also appeared behind her, a cold sweat running down my back. Considering the time, Jack wasn't home yet, which meant these two were trying to drive me out without him knowing. "Don't ever come near my brother again," my sister-in-law sneered, exchanging a triumphant smile with my mother-in-law. I looked around, but there wasn't a single passerby in sight. I felt like a frog being stared down by a snake. Swallowing hard, I said, "I'll be gone in an hour," mustering all my strength to sound confident and not let my voice tremble. It was a gamble. I pulled out my phone and called someone I trusted, my high school teacher, Daniel. Daniel had been a great support to me, especially as an orphan with no relatives. He had stayed in touch even after I graduated, always telling me to reach out if I was in trouble. As I made the call, my mother-in-law and sister-in-law glared at me, but I ignored them and told Daniel, "I'm being driven out by my in-laws. I need help." It felt burdensome to ask, but since I couldn't rely on Jack, Daniel was my only option. After listening to my story, Daniel simply said, "All right," and hung up. My in-laws sneered. "Who did you call? You don't even have a family. The cavalry you're expecting won't come." But I said nothing in return, just stood there motionlessly. Eventually, they grew impatient and went back inside. I believed Daniel would come and waited for about an hour. Then, to my surprise, a luxury car approached, its engine humming loudly. My eyes widened in astonishment. Perhaps alerted by the sound, my mother-in-law and sister-in-law peeked out from the entrance. "What is that? Isn't that a luxury car worth $400,000? My sister-in-law exclaimed, astonished. Daniel arrived in a relaxed tone, smiling gently as he stepped out of the driver's seat. "Hey, sorry to keep you waiting," he said, just as calm and kind as always. "I'm so sorry for calling you out of the blue." "Thank you so much," I said, getting into Daniel's car. My mother-in-law and sister-in-law stared at me, dumbfounded. "Emma has been a great help to us. I'd like to say goodbye now, but first, please take this," Daniel said, handing me a piece of paper, a divorce paper. He passed it to me, and I looked at him, nodding firmly. I quickly filled out my information right then and there, stepped out of the car, and handed it to my mother-in-law. "I am divorcing Jack. I love him, but I can no longer associate with you. Please pass on my regards to him." I spoke clearly, leaving my stunned in-laws behind as we swiftly drove off. In the rearview mirror, I saw my mother-in-law and sister-in-law shouting something, but I ignored their voices and turned to Daniel. "Thank you so much," I said. "Oh, this is nothing. I have something even better prepared for you," Daniel replied. I was confused, not understanding what he meant. After a 30-minute drive, we arrived at Daniel's house. "We're here," he announced. I looked at the grand house with a magnificent gate, almost like a castle. "Is this your house, Daniel?" I asked, astonished. "Yes, I recently bought it," he said. I recalled that he had lived in a smaller house before. "Didn't you buy another house before?" I asked. He nodded, explaining, "I sold that one. I wanted something bigger." Daniel led me inside. The house was spacious and filled with luxurious furniture. I was amazed. Then Daniel said seriously, "Actually, Emma, I've been thinking. Would you like to live here with me?" I was speechless, taken aback by his proposal. He continued, "I've been worried about you since you told me about your troubles. You used to come to me with concerns during high school, and sometimes even after you started working. We haven't been in touch much lately, but I've always been concerned. It's like I'm your parent, but I'm not your parent, Emma." As he spoke, the doorbell rang, echoing throughout the house. I flinched, and Daniel quickly headed toward the entrance. When he opened the heavy front door, I was shocked to see my mother-in-law, sister-in-law, and even Jack glaring at us. Jack looked anxious and avoided eye contact. "Oh, Emma, so this is where you've been. What's all this with such a grand house?" My mother-in-law sneered. I realized they had followed me here using the GPS tracker on my phone. Jack must have been brought here after work. "Is there something you need?" I asked, trying not to show my nervousness, though sweat was pouring from my palms. "Yes, there is. You ran off in a luxury car, and now you're in this beautiful house." "Explain this," my sister-in-law demanded. It was clear they were jealous, having intended for me to feel miserable after being driven out. They had no right to demand explanations. "There's nothing to explain. This is Daniel's house. He gave me a ride and brought me here," I said, but my explanation didn't convince them. They responded with a skeptical "huh." Seeing our discomfort, Daniel stepped forward confidently. "From today, this house is mine and Emma's. Outsiders, please do not enter." Their shocked reactions matched my own disbelief. "What do you mean by that? So Emma gets to live in such a grand house? You must be joking." "We always wanted you to be miserable," my sister-in-law blurted out, revealing her true feelings. It became clear that they had always enjoyed tormenting me, pushing me to the limit until they could discard me. Jack tried to speak up, saying, "Hey, you two are going too far," but a glance from his mother silenced him. He really was a weak man. Turning to Daniel, I asked, "What do you mean by our home?" I tried to make sense of everything in my confused state. Daniel looked at me and smiled warmly. "Just as I said, I actually own much of the land around here. I have plenty of land and money, so I've been thinking about adopting you and passing on my assets to you." His revelation made my eyes widen. A landowner passing on assets seemed unbelievable. My mother-in-law and sister-in-law appeared equally shocked, knowing I had grown up in an orphanage. They likely relished the idea of me being left out in the cold. But then Daniel, this mysterious figure, offered to adopt me. I was stunned. Daniel continued, "Actually, I owe a lot to your parents. When I first became a teacher, they were colleagues who supported me when I was relentlessly bullied by a superior. They helped me while others ignored it. I was close to them ever since. I never imagined they'd pass away so early in an accident. I was really shaken at that time and thought about how I could honor their memory. When I learned you were attending the same high school where I worked, I made it a point to reach out to you, maybe too eagerly." Hearing Daniel's confession surprised and delighted me. I barely remembered my parents, but knowing they were such warm people touched my heart. That's why I was happy when you came to me for help this time. I bought this house thinking a day might come when you'd need a place to stay, but I didn't expect it to be so soon. Daniel's glare shifted to my mother-in-law and sister-in-law, making even me shiver. "Please stop following her. If you try to take away her happiness, I will not forgive you. I will pursue every legal avenue to protect her. And you," he turned to Jack, "should have protected her but did nothing. You don't deserve to be with Emma. Now, please leave." Daniel's voice echoed powerfully through the entrance. "I don't want to be part of your family anymore," I said, finally finding the courage. "You've treated me like a slave from the start, thinking you found a convenient woman. You will never understand the pain and suffering you've caused me. Jack, I did love you, but I love myself more. Goodbye." With Daniel's support, I finally voiced what I had long held back. The three of them began to tremble. "Remember this, I will make you regret this one day. You will suffer," my mother-in-law threatened. They spat out various lines before hastily retreating. Feeling like I might collapse, I took a deep breath and looked at Daniel. He gazed at me warmly. "Daniel, thank you so much. I don't know how to thank you enough," I said. "No need to thank me. I've always cared about you, being the daughter of my benefactors," Daniel replied with a kind smile. I felt a sense of relief and salvation. "About the adoption, if you're uncomfortable, it's okay," Daniel said, waving his hand dismissively. "I thought it would be the quickest way to transfer my assets to you. I don't plan on getting married again, and it would fulfill my wish." Daniel seemed like a godsend, endlessly kind. I agreed to think about the adoption but was eager to enjoy the newfound freedom. 2 weeks later, an unexpected situation arose. My mother-in-law and sister-in-law were arrested. They had been caught wearing all black and acting suspiciously near Daniel's house. It turned out they had been trying to break in to commit burglary, thinking they could turn their fortunes around by stealing valuables. But their plan ended miserably, with them being arrested. Jack is now living alone in the in-law house. In the end, Jack and I divorced. The fact that he didn't protect me when I needed it most hurt the most. If I ever consider marrying again, I'll make sure to find someone who truly values me. Now, I'm living comfortably in Daniel's house. We've agreed to proceed with the adoption. I initially felt guilty, but Daniel had been lonely living alone. I'm truly happy now, living with Daniel, who I regard as my real father. I've also cancelled my old phone and replaced it with a new one, free from the fear of being tracked. I'm determined to work hard to repay Daniel's kindness and have vowed never to go through such an experience again.